Hi, this is Joe again with another movie review. And some movie review, this time, as of this date, I have, on the day I posted this video, the highest rated video that I have, on my YouTube channel, is the Ken Burns baseball documentary, which I think in that check has over 270 views on, which I'm surprised by that. So I'm going to be doing the review on the documentary that put Ken Burns on the map, the 1990 PBS documentary, The Civil War. Because this was the documentary, like I said at the top, this was the documentary that put Ken Burns on the map. Before that, during the 80s, Ken Burns did do a couple of documentaries during the 80s. I think one on the Statue of Liberty and the other one on the Brooklyn Bridge. But this time he decided to do one on the entire American Civil War. Which, before then, there wasn't really one that made documentaries based on the Civil War. Of course, there were big theatrical movies, like Out with the Wind, and more recently, over the time the Civil War aired, was Glory. Starring Denzel Washington and Matthew Broderick. Excuse me. And there were a couple of documentaries and individual battles, but not one that covered the entire war. And Ken Burns decided, after he read a book, a Civil War book called The Killer Angels, which is based on the Battle of Gettysburg, he decided to make a whole documentary on the Civil War, and it took him about 6 years to do it. The way the editing, and of course that really set the top of documentaries, because they had first person live actors in recording studio reading letters and journals from the people who wrote them in first person narration. And you also had David McCullough, the great historian, narrating throughout the whole documentary. And of course, it lasted, I think the whole documentary itself was about 11.5 hours. So it's very, very long to sit through, at least in one sitting. So, but he decided to do that, and it's still to this day, almost 25 years, over 24 years after it originally aired on PBS, still the highest rated program, or highest rated series in the history of PBS. And of course, the first episode, which it aired in September 1990, was, of course, on how the war started. And of course, almost right away, there was also the first documentary that, of course, Ken Burns really laid in on the racial angle. Because he made almost right away that the Civil War was based on slavery. And he said how bad slavery was. I'm not saying, some plantation owners that went over the top and how they treated the slaves. But that's what he really focused on, the liberal point of view on how the war started, not the actual view. That was all based on slavery, because slavery was always in the background on how the war started, and then became in the forefront later on with Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. He wrote it in 1862. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Not only did he go into detail on how bad slavery was, but he also went into the John Brown raid in Harper's Ferry. And that, of course, thanks to John Brown, brought the Civil War started a lot earlier than it did. Because he's the one who put out the forefront to abolish slavery much earlier. And because he did that, the whole hate people who want to get rid of slavery. And now the real reason why we had the Civil War was because the southern states who had slavery was prominent in that time, did not want the federal government telling them how they have their states. Because at that time, it was up to the state's decision whether or not they want to have slavery in that state. And the states, particularly the southern states, did not want to have the federal government telling them that no state should have slavery. And of course, eventually, because of Lincoln, eventually they got rid of slavery because he put in the Emancipation Proclamation. So by that time, it was up to the states to vote, the state legislations to vote whether or not to have slavery in that state, or to allow slavery in that state. And the federal government was pushing the southern states not to expand slavery, as each new state came into the Union, like Texas, and after the American-Mexican War, to expand slavery, and they were worried that slavery would expand, and they would never the abolitionists would never get rid of it, because it always would be there. So the federal government getting more and more abolitionists in there in power, and so that's what caused the Civil War, because they felt the states' rights more important than federal rights, and federal laws. That's what caused this. That's what really caused it, because they felt that they shouldn't run into what each state decides to have as laws. And slavery, of course, was being one of them, but that's besides the point. They felt that the federal government should not run into what the states do. That's why we had the war. So that's what caused it. And of course, in 1861, the first part of it had the attack on Fort Sumter. And of course, it goes on to the end of the war, which they had the Solomon Balut letter was read at the end of it, and he was killed at the first battle of Bull Run, which was also discussed in the first episode. And of course, the second episode was 1862, was when Robert E. Lee came in and took control of the Army of Northern Virginia, as it was later dubbed. It was later called the Army of Northern Virginia, and he was winning battle after battle after battle, even though the Northern Army had more men, more supplies. They were losing every battle because of the incompetence and the leadership. Because the Southern Army had the better generals, and who had better strategy going on. And then, of course, you had that's what mostly was in 1862, and how bad the war was, and how General Sherman, from the North, was actually dismissed from the army because people thought he was nuts. In 1861, because he thought that was after Bull Run, there was going to be this long war, because people expected the war to last a couple of months. Meanwhile, it lasted 4 years. And also they got rid of Grant for a while, because Grant was a drunk, so they got rid of him for a while for being a drunk, and Sherman because he was crazy. But then eventually they found out they weren't so crazy, that Sherman was not as crazy as anybody thought, and he got back on. Now, of course, the third episode was, of course, episodes actually 4 and 5 minute series, because each episode was not even an hour and a half long, maybe sometimes an hour and 10 minutes or an hour and 15 minutes long. So it's not very long episodes. Of course, it was 1863, which of course was the turning point in the whole Civil War, because halfway through it, of course, you had the Battle of Gettysburg. And this is what, to me, was the highlight of the whole series. Was when you had, let me go back at the end of 1862, was when you had the Emancipation Proclamation was announced. And of course, actually, the blacks were happy, and that's what Ken Burns himself was happy, because the blacks were going to be freed. Like I mentioned in my Ken Burns baseball series review, he always goes over how whites are bad and blacks are good type stuff, because it made the liberal jackass that he is. That's what he decided to do. So you have in 1863 with the Battle of Gettysburg. But now we're going to go back to the Battle of Gettysburg. To me, that's what the highlight of the whole Civil War series to me is with the Battle of Gettysburg. And Ken Burns, I thought he did great detail on the 3 days of the battle. Of course, ending with Little Bighorn with Colonel I forgot the guy. damn it, I forgot the guy's name. Oh, Colonel Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. He's the guy who saved the whole Union Army. Because after Gettysburg, by Gettysburg, the Union Army was getting a little more momentum going. And then, of course, by the Battle of Gettysburg, because the Northern Army won it, that turned the tide in the whole Civil War. And of course, that's when they won the battle because of what Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain did on Little Round Top. And I actually went to in 1983. I actually went to Gettysburg, and there's a picture, and my father took a picture of myself and my sister standing on top of Little Round Top, which is kind of a thrill because this is where the war changed to the northern side, and of course, the Northern Army eventually, of course, won the war. And of course, at the end of that part is when they had Lincoln give out Lincoln's his famous Gettysburg Address, and how the crowd, the way they came about is because in November of 1863, because they had so many people, so many soldiers dead on both sides. It was the Northern Army, but the Southern Army as well. They decided to have the first ever national cemetery in Gettysburg for the soldiers who were killed in the Civil War. And they invited Lincoln as an afterthought to give a few appropriate remarks. And while the featured speaker was a man named Everett, I forgot what his first name was, and he gave a speech over 2 hours. Over a 2-hour speech. Imagine if some politician gives an over 2-hour speech today. I mean, he would get ridiculed for it. But not in those days. And now Lincoln came up and he gave his Gettysburg Address that's just a little more than 2 minutes. And after he gave a speech, nobody applauded. If you could believe it. And then, of course, and the guy who spoke for 2 hours said to Lincoln, "You expressed more in 2 minutes than I did in 2 hours." And he thought his speech was terrific and should have gotten recognized for it. And of course, that's one of the most famous speeches of all time. And of course, in 1864, with the war still continuing on, and with the Northern Army starting to win. And of course, by the end of 1864, there was a guy who lost his son. He was a soldier, I think like a colonel or general in the Northern Army, lost his son in the Civil War. And the Northern Army took over General Lee's house, and on spite, he had his son buried in Mrs. Lee's rose garden. And of course, that started with the Arlington National Cemetery. By the end of 1864, it was recognized as Arlington National Cemetery, because Arlington is the name of Robert E. Lee's house. And of course, thus became the famous Arlington National Cemetery. And the funny thing is, the thing that I honor every year for Memorial Day and for Veterans Day, you're doing the ceremony on the original house that Robert E. Lee, the general of the Southern Army, owned. So I wonder if Obama or Ebola, President Ebola, would do. That's why he hasn't really done all that many ceremonies, placing the wreath of the tomb of the unknowns, because of that fact. That's probably why, because he didn't want to do the ceremony in the house of a guy who fought to keep the slaves. You know, that's probably why. Of course, let me go back to the 1863 part. Previously, I mentioned the movie Glory with Denzel Washington and Matthew Broderick. After the Battle of Gettysburg, and of course Vicksburg also fell on the same day. Because the Union Army surrounded the city of Vicksburg, and Vicksburg surrendered the same day as the Union Army won Gettysburg. They won in Vicksburg. they also discussed in 1863 the big battle at the end of the movie Glory, because it was the first black regiment. The 54th Massachusetts was an all-black regiment, and most of them got killed during a siege at Barry Wagner. It was, I believe, it was in South Carolina, I believe. So Ken Burns does discuss that because of the black thing again, or the black angle in his documentaries. Please, I want to note that I'm not a racist in any way. It's just that I can't stand that Ken Burns just keeps throwing the black angle in our faces all the time in his documentaries. I'm just making that point. He keeps throwing up the black angle and how racist whites are. Somebody keeps bringing that up in the documentaries. They're racist themselves, or anti-white people. And Ken Burns is an anti-white person, and he's white himself. Alright, so I just want to make that, put that point out there. So actually, of course, the last two episodes was actually based in 1865 with the war ending. The first half is when the war ended and when Lee surrendered to Grant in Appomattox Courthouse. And the irony is that the house where Lee surrendered to Grant was owned by a guy, Willard McLean, I believe. And in the very first battle of Bull Run in 1861, his house was very near or on the property where they had the first battle of Bull Run. So he says, "Oh, I had enough of this crap," and he decided to find this little nook that was called Appomattox Courthouse to get away from the war. And hopefully the war wouldn't get to where he's at. Well, the war did get to where he was, like 4 years later, where Lee surrendered to Grant, and it was in his Willard McLean's house when Lee surrendered to Grant. So it's kind of ironic. There's a lot of ironies in the Civil War, which I'm not going to go into all that detail because too many to pan out. I'll be here forever. So, of course, after when Lee surrendered to Grant, the second half was, of course, when Lincoln was assassinated at Ford's Theater by John Wilkes Booth, was a famous actor. Him and his two brothers were three of the most famous actors in the United States at that time. And he decided John Wilkes Booth went nuts, and he decided to kill Lincoln because he favored the South, even though he didn't have the nerve to fight for the South or enlist for the Southern Army. He decided to do the quickest thing and kill Lincoln, which of course he did. Of course, obviously he was successful at. And of course he had the bit when the story when the Union Army tracked him down and killed him. Even though there was a story that he got out of the barn, which the Union Army caught him or surrounded. He somehow got out of it, which is on Unsolved Mysteries. If you haven't tracked that story now on YouTube. Excuse me. And of course they have these historians and analysts and discussing who won the war and how they show clips of the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg, which Franklin Roosevelt dedicated the Eternal Light Peace Monument on the Gettysburg battlefield. Of course, what happened was when this documentary did air, which when I go back and discuss one particular point which I glossed over because I'm going through it too fast. Let me go back a minute. When Lincoln made his Emancipation Proclamation, there's one point of fact that Ken Burns left out. When Lincoln made his Emancipation Proclamation, a lot of the Union soldiers, the majority of them, did not want to fight to free the slaves, because they enlisted and fought for the North, thus to preserve the Union, which is what the war was about, to preserve the Union and keep the Union intact and not to have it split in half. When Lincoln made his Emancipation Proclamation, which had absolutely zero effect, because the southern states were a separate country at the time. So there's no way in hell can the Emancipation Proclamation affect the South, even though technically it was written that way. And now the Northern soldiers were ticked off beyond belief that Lincoln changed what the war was. And by the way, one more other thing. The Confederate flag is not a racist flag. It's a flag that's a part of American history. And if there are any blacks, or at least blacks in the United States who are watching this video, it's not a racist flag. Contrary to the popular effect of what the Ku Klux Klan used it for their symbol, another hate groups use it as a symbol. Screw them. Screw the hate groups, okay? The Confederate flag is a part of American history. Like it or not. You just have to accept that fact. We're going back to I know I'm going to too much of a tangent on that, but it's a fact. When this series aired in 1990, like I said at the top, it was like it's still the highest rated show in the history of PBS. And when Ken Burns made his baseball series, it was like the second highest. And Ken Burns has made a bunch of documentaries after that, but most recently, the Roosevelts. Those series did not get the high ratings as the Civil War did. Most disappointing one, which I might do a review on, was the War series about World War II, which was very disappointing because he didn't detail the war, because he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to make another series like the Civil War, which he details World War II. He didn't want to do that again. So that's why he did that. But it turns out with the Civil War, that got such high ratings and renewed interest in the American Civil War. The attendance for Civil War battlefields, particularly in Gettysburg and other Civil War battlefields, that's still pretty much intact and preserved by the Civil War Preservation Trust. This is an organization. You can look it up on the internet. You can sign up, and you can help preserve these not only battlefields like Gettysburg, but other Civil War battlefields. And this rackets, the tourism for these battlefields went up huge because of the Civil War. But not only that, but junior high and high schools taped this documentary and they showed it for the high schools. Even though nowadays schools in the United States do not teach history anymore. And I know this for a fact. When I was in high school, when I got to sign up for American history, the teachers don't teach any of the wars anymore. Any war that's in American history, going back to the Revolutionary War, they don't teach anymore. Because they don't want to dramatize the kids. Well, because wars are too blank, fact. But I feel that the Civil War should be taught in schools, plus all the other wars in American history. Because of that fact, and the Civil War renewed interest. And next year, in 2015, will be the 25th anniversary of the Civil War series. And I won't be surprised if PBS puts it on sometime because it's the 25th anniversary. So that's my review of the Ken Burns series. I know the video is a little longer, 24 minutes now. It's a 24-minute video as of right now. So please feel free to comment on the video. Please read it. Please subscribe to my channel, and please forward this video onto your Facebook pages. Thanks for watching, and catch you next time, and please also check out my other videos as well. Catch you next time.